to the special meeting, the budget session for Lewiston City Council, May 12, 2025, at the time and place is advertised. Our next order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. So if everyone would please stand and join us in reciting our pledge.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America,
and to
to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you, Council. I'll try to speak up loudly. Our next order of business is citizen comments, but I don't see any citizens in the room, so I'm not going to read that long statement. And we'll just move forward to, Roman number 4, budget items, A, B, and C. A is personnel cost, B is internal service rates, and C is insurance. We have our, are you going to present all three? Maybe?
No, I'm just going to kick it off.
Oh, okay. We have our finance director to present personnel costs first, item A. And again, counselors, for those at home, can you see the display there, fiscal year 26?
No, I don't see it. No, there it goes.
There it is.
I see it now.
Thank you. Director Gordon, please introduce yourself for the record.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council, Amy Gordon, City Treasurer and Finance Director. So we're here today for our first look at the 2026 budget and to discuss some budget-related items. We have also provided council with some binders, and I want to make certain that council members take the time to look through those binders because we put some additional information in there that will be helpful for council to understand how the budget is constructed. We have information in there about our various funds, what those purpose of those funds are, and the revenue sources for those funds and the type of revenues that support the funds. There's also some information in there on the internal service rates for the internal service funds that we'll be discussing later. We won't spend a lot of time talking about those rates because we have provided that information in your binders. So just take a look through that. That will help you understand how we develop those rates. Before we dive into today's budget work session items, I do want to give council a little information on what goes on behind the scenes. I think that's important to know that in addition to presenting information to you in a work session form, we're also constructing that budget while we do it. So during the month of April, we take our current year budget, we make a copy of it, and that then becomes our foundation for the next year budget. Our directors, they go through, they review their budgets, we sit down with the directors, we have discussions with them if we have questions about what some of those budgets are for, if they're needed, if we need to take a look at them. They might have questions for us. And then they go through and they review their budget. They can move dollars around within their budget. If they need more money for contracted services, but they think they'll have savings elsewhere, they can make those movements within their budget. What they can't do is they can't increase their budget. So there's a process for departments if they feel like their budget's not sufficient, that they need some additional assistance to cover increased costs or to provide new costs to their budget. So they go through that budget request form process, which council will end up getting copies of all those requests. And then outside that section of their budget, they're really focused on their operating budget with the exception of personnel cost. Finance, we go through and we recalculate all the personnel costs. We do it based off what our existing employee population is. So Nikki will talk more about that to you today, but there's a lot of cost within the budget that directors aren't, that they may change, but it's not because the director is changing them. They have a process they have to go through. So today's meeting, we're going to discuss those type of expenses that will possibly change outside their review of the budget. And the first one is personnel cost.
Director Province, welcome. Please introduce yourself for the record.
Yeah, Nikki Province, HR Director for the city. I'm going to talk about some personnel costs. Personnel do make up a large portion of the budget. It includes not only pay, but also benefits, retirement, and other payroll costs. We're going to walk through some data about the city's employee population. Some of these slides should look familiar from last year, just updated with some information that council previously wanted to know about. So hopefully we can move to the next. I don't know, do I have control over this? There we go. So this is just a demonstration of our employee groups. Right now we have a total of 329 employees. This is full-time and part-time, so this does not include our seasonal employees. Those fluctuate throughout the year, increase significantly come summer months, so they're not captured in this total. So you can see our non-reps are the largest, and then you have your 3 union groups. These next 3 slides I don't want to spend a lot of time on, but this is just to demonstrate the types of positions. I think when it comes to non-represented, a lot of people think about directors and managers, forgetting that this also includes our library workers, our senior nutrition workers, some of our recreational employees, as well as our community development staff and some public work administration staff. So it does incorporate quite a few different positions within that employee group. And then you have your AFSCME. This is going to be your water, wastewater, engineering techs, your street maintenance, your mechanics, et cetera. And then you have your FOP employees. These are police officers. These are your dispatchers. These are your records and evidence. And then you have your firefighters. These are going to be firefighters, engineers, captains, et cetera. So just some general employee facts. So we updated our length of service. You can see that our largest employee group is the 1 to 5 years, and the longevity decreases as you go out. We did have, an increase in our retirements last year. I also want to point out that these are the number of employees at max step by group. Some of this might just be that we have employees who promote differently and maybe get to that maximum step a little quicker than others. You can see a total of 80, so it's just a portion of your overall 329. Draw your focus to the turnover rates. So as you can see in 2024, we had a little bit of a significant turnover rate. I think that happened to Greg, didn't it?
I was having a flashback for a second.
I didn't even touch it. Okay. It just slides right off. And here I am moving forward. Okay, the increase could be a number of things. This could be the job market. This could be, I know even this year we've had several employees resign due to other promotional opportunities in other cities. Some of our feedback for exit questionnaires has shown us that there has been some maybe pay. So it could be a number of reasons why it's jumped up. Something to consider, maybe not this budget year, but maybe next budget year. It'll be 5 years since our last salary survey. And so maybe consider doing another salary survey to see where the city of Lewiston lands in its comparable market. I will point out that since we do negotiate with the being looked at every time they renew their contract, so maybe to start, we look at the non-represented population to see if we compare with our overall market. Personnel, so this is that go towards personnel costs. So your governmental fund, 70% of that fund is going to go to, these are more of your administrative positions. They don't have any capital, so it's really just the operating budget. And then you have your enterprise funds. They're about 30% of their operating budget. That's because they also have large infrastructure costs operating. And then you have your internal service, which are kind of like a hybrid. They have both administrative And then they do require supplies and materials. So 40% of their operating budget does go towards personnel costs. We'll spend a little time here with Percy. This is actually, so as you can see over the last couple of years, Percy has required an increase in the employer contribution. That July of this year, we would see another bump for our public safety. They actually met, I think, last September, the board, Percy board, and determined that the rates in April of this year. So that's already happened. April 1st, you can see they went from 14.65% down to 13. Maybe a savings for us because we aren't anticipating, number one, it reduced, but also it's not increased. News for the budget. If you guys have any questions, stop me along the way. We always talk about the cost of living when we talk about personnel costs. This is an adjustment annually based on the CPI for January, February, and March. This was initially around 2017. Previously, our cost of living just was different amongst employee groups. City Council at that time determined that they wanted to be conservative and kind of mimic what Social Security was doing for their CPI, which ultimately March average. And so all of our represented employees, they have contract language that says they'll get a minimum of 1% COLA, maximum of 2.5%. So the CPI this year, you can see from my slide, is 2.6. For finance is budgeting for a 2.5% COLA for all employee groups. Any questions about cost of living? Pretty normal conversation up until this point. We always like to take a moment here to talk about our employee benefit plan, since there is a cost from the city for that benefit plan. Our plan renews annually every January, but our premiums change every October. We have managed in the last 3 years to, as our health trust has done so well in our investments, we've really been able to ladder our investments over a 3-year period, and we're taking that interest or whatever that we're getting, and we're putting it kind of towards any increases that have happened over the last 3 years. I'm a trustee for the plan, and as well as Shannon Grow and Deb Lewis, who is our assistant finance manager, and we're still our insurance company on what our renewal will look like, what it will cost. We've kind of given some direction that we want our benefits administrator to go negotiate on. And so we really don't have an understanding of what that renewal will look like today. So finance is currently just kind of put in a 2% so that they can determine what the budget ultimately will look like. But once we get those negotiation determinations, we'll have a better idea of if we need to even increase premiums, or can we make another year with a 0 increase. We're not entirely sure. At some point, we probably will. Our CDs are laddered for 3 years, but we anticipate interest rates to come down. So that additional benefit that we've gotten might reduce over time, and we have to be prepared for that. The below financial information, that's just for, Councilor Wright may not be aware, but the benefit trust is a separate entity from the city, so that it has its own trustees that are fiduciarily responsible for that trust. And the city then makes monthly contributions, premium contributions into that trust, as well as our employees who have premium deductions go into that trust. And then the trust then therefore pays for claims. This money can only be used for benefits, so it's not something that can be taken and shared with another portion of the budget for streets or for anything like that. It has to be used for employee benefits. And that's restricted under the Department of Insurance, which the trust follows by state statute and gets regular audits, regular quarterly financial reports, annual reports that we're required to submit to the Department of Insurance to ensure that we're accurately funding that trust.
A self-funded?
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, we're self-funded. And so the city pays 100% of an employee's premium and then 80% of its dependents' premium. And so those contributions go to that trust. And you're right, we're using a third-party administrator for our claims. So that's where our insurance kind of comes into, we use a stop loss with them as well as administrative costs. They process our claims and then monthly bill us for what we owe on those claims. So, yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. Our total expenses for fiscal year '24 were the $5,618,000. Our total contributions were the $5,379. We do have some other revenue that comes into our trust from our stop loss reimbursement. So anytime a claim goes above $60,000, our stop loss kicks in, and then they reimburse us for any costs. We have prescription rebates, and then, like I said, those investment income has done really well for us and being able to not increase the premiums over the last 3 years. And we'll, I guess, determine whether we can make it another year or not. Any other questions on the health trust? And then I'm going to give it back to Amy for internal service funds.
Thank you, Nate.
Yeah.
Director Province.
Amy Gordon, Finance Director. Nikki hit on a few points during her presentation about finance. We're working on calculating out those payroll costs. And something I failed to mention at the start is we're continuously working on the budget between now and up until we present that final work session with council at the end of June. So as of today, we don't know the impact payroll cost will have on the budget because we're still calculating it. We're still trying to pin down the unknowns at this time. So it's always this work in progress, but the payroll takes us quite a bit of time to recalculate. And so when we come to you in June to discuss funding the budget, we're really going to be kind of fresh on what we know at that time is necessary to fund the budget. So we don't know at this point in time what our recommendation will be to council in regards to property taxes. It's just a work in progress at this point in time. So it's really when we get to the end of June where we know that information and we'll make that presentation. And then from there, we start working on all of our budget documents. And that's kind of when council gets to review those budget numbers and look at, what we're recommending in regards to funding the budget and maybe other options for the budget. But right now we're going to move into internal service funds. First, what is an internal service fund? So we have 3 internal service funds in the city. So up on the slide, you can see all the funds of the city. The 3 that are in the dark blue are the internal service funds. Internal service funds are funds that are created to provide support and services to city departments. If you have employees in your department, you are getting services from these 3 funds. More specifically, the bottom 2 funds are information systems and security and the workers' compensation. If you also have vehicles you utilize to perform your service, you're receiving services from the Fleet Services Division. They develop out their rates. There's information about how they develop those rates in your binders. They charge those various departments those rates. The departments pay it into the fund, and then they use those funds to then provide their service, replace their capital needs. The rates are broken out into 2 components. There's an operating rate and a capital rate. Again, that information's in the binder. And here's kind of like a little snapshot of what each one of these funds provides in regards to services and capital needs. Our fleet service they have 4 technicians that maintain all the city vehicles. Included in their operating budget is training funds, funds that they need to buy equipment and tools, replacement parts, oil, and then capital, they replace all the city vehicles for the governmental funds. Enterprise funds will purchase their own vehicles, but any of the governmental funds are paid for out of the fleet fund. Then they are the owner of those funds or those vehicles and then replace them based off a replacement schedule. Information systems, they're similar to fleet. However, their largest expense outside labor is software. Software is a big component of their budget, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. And then their capital replacement program covers all of our individual workstations. It also includes replacing the mobile data computers and the police vehicles, radios. And then they have a lot of equipment needs outside our personal computers to maintain the city network, and the infrastructure that goes along with that network.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
Under the fleet services, what's structure improvements?
So fleet services, we have a service center and it is a city-owned vehicle. And the main building itself is maintained by facilities as a facility responsibility, so to speak. However, there are components within that service center that are very specific to fleet. So for example, hoist that lift the vehicles up in the air, we just replaced those here within the last couple of years. So if we're doing a improvement that's specific to the fleet services function, they will make those replacements and improvements out of their own budget. So like resurfacing the shop floor, exhaust filters, those type of smaller improvements to the building.
Okay, thanks.
Workers' compensation is an internal service fund. It's structured a little bit different. We'll talk about that one first. Up on the slide, you have a graphic here, which is kind of displaying the workers' compensation reserves. We'll talk about those in a minute. The workers' compensation fund we are self-funded for workers' compensation as well. We calculate out our premium cost for the various departments. The departments pay the premium into the workers' compensation fund. And from there, we pay out the medical claims for any injury claims, as well as we have stop loss coverage. And then we use a third party to administer the claims. The workers' compensation fund up until, my eyes are not good enough to see that far, up until 2021, we were growing our reserves, and then we had 2 high claimants at that point in time that has really driven our reserves down. We did do an actuary last year to get a better idea of what the sweet spot is for the reserves. They came back with a recommendation of 1.6 million. Myself and our risk manager, Jean Harrington, we're more comfortable. We'd like to see it back up to the 2.5 million because we can see off just 2 high claims what that's done to those reserves. We would prefer a better cushion. I think that would be more responsible from a budgetary standpoint. We wouldn't want to be in a position where the reserves drop below 1.6 million and we had to come up with some emergency funding to replenish those. You can see between the year 2022 and 2023, we had a decrease in our reserves of 410,000. I'll talk here in a few minutes why that number is significant. But I do want to point out that with the workers' compensation fund, we record, it's a cash basis. We record those claims when we pay them. It's not feasible to try to accrue and capture the cost of a claim on, because the claims can go on for many, many years. Each claim has its own shape, so to speak. We have some claims that could be low-cost claims, but we'll pay on that claim for the lifetime of the employee. We can have an employee be injured and they require some surgery, time off work, physical therapy, but they're expected to have 100% recovery. And so it might seem like it's a costly claim, but it's not expected to continue into the future. Then we have other claims that can have significant medical cost over several years. What we consider a high claim, when I use that word high claim, is the claims that have the potential of hitting the stop loss threshold. So for a general employee, it's $500,000. For a public safety employee, it's $750,000. So when we talk about less than a responsible amount of reserves, that's why Jean would like us to see higher than what the actuaries are recommending, because we're trying to mitigate our risk of having multiple high claims at one time. Yes.
With the current open claims, and you don't have to answer this now, but with the current claims that are open, are we forecasting continued downward trend if we don't put more money into this fund, or what is the outlook of the trend?
Right now, we were feeling really optimistic. Last year when we wrote the budget, we were looking at the amount that deplenished over those 2 years at $410,000. The mayor and I met, we came up with a plan about, in addition to looking at increasing the annual premium amount, which, let me just move on to the next slide. We talked through two different options. We could increase that premium and do a much more significant increase on the premium that would have that ongoing impact to the budget, or we could take a look at utilizing some of our reserves to replenish the reserves of the workers' compensation fund. So in the current budget year, as well as next budget year, we have planned contributions to those funds of $205,000 each, which will replenish those 2 years, 2022 and 2023's losses. And 2024, our claim history at that point in time, based on our open claims, was looking well. And right now, I apologize because I didn't bring it with me, but what we have paid out in claims this year has been very minimal. So we expect to have an increase in our reserves this year. Like, we expect to have more revenue than expenses this year. And I apologize because Gene, he's out sick today, so he couldn't be here. He did send me a little statement that says our injury rates have fallen over the course of years to levels that haven't been achieved before. Our incident rate is below the BLS average for municipalities by 2 points. So we are currently between 3.7 and 4.3. The average for municipalities is around 6. So we're trending lower than average on our claims at this point in time. So I feel comfortable that we can leave our annual premium amount at the $550,000. We'll have that additional funding of $205,000 in 2026, and then we can revisit our reserves again at that time. So council could decide if they wanted to maybe have an actuary done in 2027 to visit the reserve levels and give us some direction on if they are comfortable where they're at. Are there any other questions on workers' compensation before we move on? I will say, because I don't think I mentioned this, we have the 2 high claims. The one is a general member, one is a public safety member. The public safety one did hit that stop loss threshold late last fiscal year, early this fiscal year. So all those claim costs have been reimbursed at this point in time. We'll likely see an amendment for it so we can gross out the reimbursements that we're getting back from the claims administrator. But that's kind of helped ease the burden off those costs, is that that claim is now being covered under our stop loss policy. Okay, so fleet services. They have an operating budget of slightly over 1.1 million, almost 1.2 million. So what we did here is we demonstrated on the right what their operating revenues were for fiscal year 2025. And then what their operating budget looks like for 2026, what they're projecting it to be. And as you can see, about 60% of their operating budget goes towards personnel cost. This is just the operating side of fleet. It doesn't include capital at this point. And then their next largest expense is repair parts. Repair parts have gone up significantly the last couple of years. And then we do utilize outside labor. As I mentioned earlier, we have 4 equipment services technicians that are the individuals that maintain all the city vehicles, but we have some labor costs that it just makes sense to outsource them. One example of that, like we don't do any body work. All of our body work is taken outside to be done. If you look over on the revenue side, our operating rates for the current year are just slightly under 1.1 million. And you can see it's not quite up there where the operating expense budget is. We have been utilizing a little bit of reserves each year. And their request is to increase their operating rates by 6% for 2026. And then here's a look at the capital side for fleet. Our annual capital rates are currently about 1.3 million, just slightly over 1.3 million. In this current budget year, we have about 760,000 of equipment replacements. That seems like a big gap, but if you take a look at how the reserves can bounce around in the fleet fund. So in 2023, we had another low year as far as the equipment replacement budget because we were ramping the capital reserves up to make the purchase of that ladder truck. In 2024, we ordered a ladder truck. We had to pay for that up front. It was 1.6 million. Yeah. And so that truck is currently in production. So now we have another kind of light year of replacement so that we can help reestablish those reserves because we're always looking out several years to see what equipment replacements we have scheduled to be replaced. And if we look forward, we can see we have a couple of average years followed by a high year. So we're building up those reserves so that we can afford some pumper fire engines in a few years.
Does those sewer trucks that have the big hose that goes down, does that come out of this? Yeah,
No, they do not. The enterprise funds, so enterprise funds, it's your water, wastewater, sanitation, and stormwater. They make their equipment purchases directly from their own budgets. But they do contribute to fleet for the maintenance side. So they pay an operating rate, not a replacement rate. And so what are the questions you might get asked? I was actually just, I went to a budget class a couple weeks ago. There was a guy in that class that was just adamantly opposed to internal service funds. He felt like you put all this work into calculating out these rates just to charge yourself a fee. But one thing to remember is we provide a variety of services here at the city of Lewiston. And we support those services through a variety of revenues. So for example, our enterprise funds, they charge you a utility rate to have water or wastewater. You might live up in the orchards and pay property taxes, but you don't pay into the water fund. So would we use property taxes to support buying vehicles and maintaining the equipment of the water fund? No, that wouldn't be fair to those water rate payers. So we have a good scenario where internal service funds make sense because we can make certain that each function of the city is paying into these funds and using the appropriate revenue sources to support those funds.
Question, on the fleet services, so the repairs that we do in-house, is this a better deal to do these repairs in-house as opposed to having a contract with some company here in town? Have we looked at something like that?
I'm gonna let Robin, our equipment services manager, come up and speak to that.
Perfect, yeah, maybe the specialty work of.
Yeah. Robin Braun, Fleet Services Manager. It has been looked at in the past, and the issue is specialty equipment, like the Vector truck. you can take that truck to Idaho Truck and they'll work on the chassis all day long. But the main part of it that usually is the issue, they don't have any interest in working in those kind of things because it's a specialty. It isn't like a logging truck or a over-the-road truck. Same way with our mowers and our other equipment that we have. It's too specialty, and you run into the issue of, well, when it breaks down, we're there and we can get it fixed. You know, unless we're held up with parts or something, we can have a very quick turnaround to get those things taken care of. Where in the general public world, you know, you take your rig in, it'd be like taking your car to the dealership and expect your car to get fixed because you need it now. Versus, oh, you gotta get scheduled and we'll work on you in 2 weeks.
Gotcha.
So the turnaround time, you know, like I said, unless there's a delay in parts or something like that, we can make the turnaround time to get that equipment back to our employees and stuff a lot better.
Yeah, that helps explain this to me pretty good.
Okay.
Are there any more questions on fleet?
Maybe I should ask this too. Where are we thinking the increase is coming from in 2026?
So with fleet services, the request was a 6% increase on their operating rates, but the capital rates were gonna remain flat. And actually, let me move forward. Nope, I went too far. In 2025 and 2026, similar to the workers' compensation fund, we're doing some additional contributions to fleet. And that is to make some corrections to the inflated cost of equipment over the last few years. Our replacement rates have an inflationary factor built into them, but it's more standard to what the CPI rate is historically. And these last 2-3 years, we've seen these extra high inflationary rates that we didn't have, that it made it difficult on our reserves. It really diminished those. And so if you take a look at that graphic, we're gonna make a contribution of about $460,000 between this year and next year of additional outside the rates. If we didn't have those funds going in there, we would run our reserves down to zero in 2028.
Gotcha. So we wouldn't be able to do these things that we have planned for 26, 27, and 28.
Correct, or we'd have to look at a different plan or look at maybe reducing fleet or something like that, or number of vehicles. There's no additional questions, I'll move on to ISS. So Information Systems and Security. They are, again, we've got their operating budget for the current year and what they project it to be in 2026. You can take a look to the right and see what their current operating revenue is. It's just slightly under their current operating budget, so they've been using a little bit of reserves each year. It's an increase on their operating rates. They, their next largest expense outside personnel is software. We'll take a look at their software budget. I do want to provide a little bit of information about how software works at the city. Over the last 10 years, we've had departments utilize software more and more every day. Last year, when council adopted the changes to the purchasing policy, in that purchasing policy, we've now made it a requirement that any software purchases in the city have to go through our Information Systems and Security department. They'll take a look at the software to make certain that it's safe to be on our network. They take a look at those software contracts. Software contracts can be really tricky. They want to make certain that we're not giving up the right to own our own data. So all the software is vetted through our Information Systems and Security department. But what will happen with software is if you are the department that has the interest in the software, because you can maybe see where it'll make efficiencies throughout the city. So you make this request to get funded for software. you purchase the software from your budget in that initial year. And if that software will be utilized throughout multiple departments throughout the city, then the ISS department absorbs that in their budget. And from that point forward, it's built into your rates. So any department who's now using that software will have a component of that built into their rates. So when we take a look at the list of software here, these are our top 9 software and the cost for those software packages. So the very first one is our Munis Cloud ERP program. So that's our big software. That's what we all use every day. We use it to write our budget. We use it to do our payroll, to maintain our benefit cost, our ledger, our financial reporting. It's all done through that software. Even though that's our most expensive software, a part of that is that it is cloud-based. So we're transferring that responsibility of storing that data, which is a lot of data, to Munis. So they're storing our data. If we had to store that internally, we would be buying additional servers. Potentially, we would have another employee within the ISS department to manage the security on that network. NeoGov is then our next costly software, but it does all of our recruitments. It does all of our personnel evaluations. So it will take an employee from being recruited and onboarded and then maintained. So it'll store all their evaluations. As a manager, any documentation you have on that employee is all stored in that software. And NeoGov also has other components within it, like it's got the train module, so we can go out and do all of our training on NeoGov, not all of it, but like recently, the HR department's been making certain that we're all current on our harassment training, because we have a requirement in the personnel policy that we receive harassment training every so many years. And so like I went out and I did my training. I was able to schedule it at a time that was convenient for me. I took a 2-hour training and I worked on it over 3 or 4 days, took my test at the end, and it tracks my progress in that training. It submits my that I've completed that training to HR, and it's checked that box that I completed a required and mandatory training. But this is just a list of software. I probably didn't give you the best explanation of each software. Dustin Spooner, our ISS director, is here if you have any additional questions.
Maybe, cost sharing with county on some of this stuff. Do we have similar software packages where we share costs with the county or with other cities?
Sure. Dustin Spooner, Information Systems Director. Yeah, we take a look at the software pretty heavy a couple times a year. And while we have combined our networks with the county in the past, we've just found that, having too many admins, hands in the pot, so to speak, is the security of it becomes complex. Who was in there, who changed what. And so it just seems like it worked for us for a long time, but now we're in that field where we're kind of backing out. We want to manage our own.
And as far as tech debt, you said you're pretty closely watching all this software. Are there some licenses that can?
So yeah, that definitely, that policy that we added in the purchasing policy, that line that says that everything has to come through ISS really has helped. Because for many years, we didn't have a director in the department and people were just ordering up software across the city. And so I think having purchasing help us with that, they see it come through. And then we check those licenses, like I said, a couple times a year, multiple times. On the lower end of this list, you don't see it, but we've reached out to departments that, hey, you haven't logged into that. for a while. We're gonna go ahead and cancel the subscription unless you wanna hold on to it. But all of these in the top 9 are heavily used.
And are these, is part of the 6% increase, because we're seeing increased fees over
Yes,
time with these?
yes, and that's, it's a hard thing when, say, a Google comes to you and says, well, this year we're increasing fees by X percent. You're just, well, we're fully invested. And we have looked at like something like that, moving away from a Google to back to a Microsoft is a big undertaking, so you have to take that into account. It's like, well, they're doing it too, so
Yeah.
it's just what, yeah.
Costs money to move.
Yeah, it costs money to move and retraining and grumbling and all that, so, yeah, we just pay it sometimes and keep moving forward.
Gotcha. Okay. Good understanding.
All right, let's see what we have next. So, I mean, Amy, this is your slide if you had anything to add, but these are the scheduled placements. These are on the capital side. We had, you can see it kind of was a rising uptick there. And then we replaced the patron PCs at the library. I think that was 25,000. And, so that kind of goes back. We looked at our PC and laptop expenses. We used to do a 3-year on replacement plan, and that was kind of on par with a lot of companies across the states. But we changed it, and we take a look at it and said, well, we're mostly cloud-based now, which you see that increase on the operating side. We're mostly cloud-based now, so the PC doesn't need to have as much power. It can be scaled down. And honestly, they're making better equipment every year. So we moved that replacement plan out 6 to 7 years so we could save on these replacements. And that was a big change, along with moving to cloud services on the other side of it. But the rest of that up there, pretty standard, just to keep your network upgraded. We have added a line for security access controls, and you see that on adding cameras and replacing physical locks with electronic locks, just trying to capture who's coming and going in our buildings. And then, on that software also some data on the back end that we're not sure, once you have that data, we can use it in different ways, but we're collecting it now. Any questions on that capital side there?
What's the interest earnings?
We do take any unused reserves that IT has as well as fleet, and we invest it.
Oh, okay.
So fleet and IT, they don't, have as much in reserves as like the general fund, but we try to capture as much opportunity as we can to keep our rates as low as possible.
All right, anything else? Good.
No, thank you.
Are there any other questions on IT rates or IT department, ISS department? It's an old habit, I keep going back to that term.
It's all the same.
So they did make a request for both their operating side and their capital side for a 6% increase on their rates. And so what will projections of what their labor cost will be. Once we have those costs computed and as known as it can be for the purpose of into their budget, we'll go through and balance out these funds to see how much that they had in reserves coming into this year, what we're projecting them to have to support 2026. And then we'll do an assessment of if that's an appropriate increase on those rate requests that they're requesting. So I just have one more topic here today, and then we'll kind of talk about what comes next. And this is just kind of a quick glance. We won't spend a lot of time on this, but this is what our insurance package is for the city. It's costly to the city to have insurance. Just probably all of us in this room, we've noticed just insurance rates as a whole have gone up significantly. I mean, I know my personal insurance has gone up quite a bit the last couple of years. The 2025, we saw an 18% increase in our premium. We also had an increase in the premium in 2024. I can't remember percentage-wise what that was. Our initial conversations with our broker and agent was to expect another 18%, which is what that bottom graph shows. But we're getting to the point where it's just almost not affordable to us. So but Gene, our risk manager, he is in conversations. He's trying to look at some maybe different structure options to our insurance policies so that we can get that number down. We don't want to put an 8% increase in our budget. Those numbers are based off initial conversations. So those are, the things that we work through right now. He's having conversations. He's looking at different structure designs. Maybe we pay some deductibles, increase our deductible amounts, and try to get those premiums down and avoid that increase. So that's going on right now. That's a to be determined, but it's something for council to be aware of. And so
I have a question.
Counselor Forsman?
Thank you. And I don't know if this would work on, a mass city level, but with like my private insurance, so you can get on like the safe driving, excuse me, sorry, my daughter, safe driving, like, I don't know, it's a safe driving app with the little thing. Is that something that we as a city maybe can do for those that are driving city vehicles to participate in that to try to see somewhat of a savings?
we've looked into that.
Nikki Province, HR Director. I'm actually over risk management, so I should know more about this than I do. But there are things from the insurance company that may, something like we now do motor vehicle record checks where we didn't previously. And so that's something that the insurance company likes and helps us, new hire drug testing, things like that try to indicate that the city's trying to be as safe as possible. When it's looking at its employee force. I mean, we could look at something like that. I do know that Gene's in constant communication with our third-party insurance company. Some of the things that they do provide in addition to this are some training. So they do provide us training for our employees, safe training, risk training. But yeah, we can certainly, any ideas we can throw their way and see if that will help us in reduction of cost. I know that one of the things that Gene has talked about is when you add things like a brand new wastewater facility or water facility, you don't think about that, but that then becomes something that you want to insure and it has a greater cost to it. So, we don't think about the little bits like that do kind of contribute to that cost. But then also, insurance companies wanting to cover municipalities. We don't have a lot of options. Like your home insurance, you might have a number of options that you can select from that will cover you. When it comes to a municipality, not all insurers are wanting to cover such significant potential cost and risk that can come with a city. So we're really limited when we're trying to look at this company versus this company versus this company. Of course, every year they do put an ask out there to see who would want to cover us, but without a lot of interest, you kind of don't have a whole lot to pick from. So, and there's been other insurance companies that have increased their rates significantly to cover municipalities. So we are kind of lucky in that we aren't seeing larger increases. So,
Who do we currently, sorry, Mayor, who do we currently insure through with like auto insurance?
Travelers Insurance.
Okay.
We use Morton Insurance and Travelers Insurance for auto, any kind of claims that we might receive. Tort claims would go through Travelers.
Thank you.
That's all that we have for you today. But we are always available for questions, especially as you look through any of the additional information. We're going to have a work session next month, earlier in the month, and we're gonna go over capital projects. The reason why we separate that out and have a work session on it is we will review capital projects for the enterprise funds, so water, wastewater, sanitation, and stormwater. And then we will also look at capital transportation projects. When we're building the budget, we let the enterprise funds program in whatever capital projects that they have in their master plans. And because each of those areas that I mentioned, they have their own designated capital funding. So built within our utility rates is excess to what's needed to support the operating side of the enterprise funds, but so we take that excess and we put it into capital projects so that we can maintain our systems and keep them as up to date as possible. So Dustin will be presenting on those, and he'll give you kind of a glimpse of what's in the capital budget for each of those areas. One thing I do want to add on what we discussed today, one thing that's interesting and important to kind of keep in mind when you're taking a look at the city's overall budget. We put out a budget in the paper that's $100 million, and people have a lot to say about that. And that's a concerning number for anyone. The areas that we discussed today, those are, so when you, it's an expense to the general fund to pay into these internal service funds, but that's then where the money is expended. So when we look at the budgets for the internal service funds, if we have cumulatively about $4 million, a budget we set for those three funds, that $4 million is also an expense to another department or fund, but the money's only leaving the city at one time, so it's always kind of, important to remember that. Not that isn't something that we should take into consideration and be careful when we're looking at those costs, but it's kind of like a duplicate cost within the budget. So just something to just kind of know in the back of your mind. That's all I have, unless you have questions.
Mayor,
Forsman?
will we go a pretty deep dive into kind of the foregone taxes and what's that going to look like, if we don't pull it or if we pull it? I don't know if we went into that in detail in the past budget sessions, and excuse me if that's just my memory, but if we aren't thinking it, I would like to go into that a little deeper.
So Councilor, what I can do is I can provide some information for the council to look at to get prep for that. That's still down the road. For example, you may choose to take a 3% budget increase in our property taxes this year, then there would be no foregone. So we are going to get to that soon, but I'm happy to provide some additional information up front and some other resources that I would like to share, and I'll talk about one of them when I get to Mayor's comments today.
Yeah, that'd be great, Mayor. There's some stuff that came up during my training that I had in Boise, and so I just wanted a chance to be able to kind of discuss that and share my findings with the rest of the council to see their thoughts on it and your thoughts.
My thoughts are I'm glad that you're bringing some of that back for all of us. Thank you.
My pleasure.
So in the late June work session, when we've kind of constructed the budget and we're taking a look at how we're going to fund that budget, foregone might be a part of that conversation. One thing I do want to mention on foregone is whether you want to dip into that pot or whether you want to add to that pot. It requires a resolution and I think a public hearing as well. So it does get discussed at that point in time, but probably depending on how you might want or not want to utilize it might, limit your conversations. I can't remember. We definitely had some conversations last year because we would have had to have a public hearing on it. I just don't remember how in-depth we got last year.
Councilor Wright?
What are some examples of state shared revenues?
We have two different state shared revenues. One is liquor apportionment and the other is sales tax. So we'll review those towards the end of June as well. We're pretty fixed on that. We're not seeing much increase to the city of Lewiston, just the way that those funds are allocated. Ours are pretty stagnant, so we can't really, lean into those for additional revenues, but. Right, if there's no further questions, I will let you get on with your meeting. Thank you.
Good, Director Gordon.
Thank you.
Okay, councilors, that brings us to Roman numeral 5, budget discussion. This is an opportunity for councilors to ask questions, have discussions, and provide direction to staff related to the fiscal year 2026 budget. This is an action item. If you have any additional questions or direction that you would like to provide staff at this time, please do so.
And Mayor?
Councilor Spickelmeyer?
Yes, I was wondering, will those binders be available at City Hall?
Yes, they will.
Okay, thank you.
We have one in your mailbox.
Okay.
Does that work?
Mayor.
Councilor Spickelmeyer, does that work?
Sorry, yes, I can't figure out my buttons here. Yep, that works. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Forsman?
I guess just more of a comment. I think my biggest concerns coming into this budget season is obviously transportation. We have a lot of roads that need repairs, and building that budget up is going to be vital for us to get ahead of those, as well as pay. Obviously, we want to be a competitive city to continue to be competitive with our workforce. And so I think those are really big concerns for me, is how can we do that cost effectively for the taxpayers?
Thank you, Councilor. Other comments, Council? Okay, we'll have another shot at this here coming up soon. Our next one is going to be June 9th, our next budget work session, but always you can contact staff, or you can even contact the mayor's office, and I'll do what I can to provide you additional information, reading information mostly, that I find to be very beneficial, much of it from the Association of Idaho Cities, which we are members of, and we pay a due, an annual fee to. So next we'll go to Roman numeral 6, unfinished and new business. Item A, city councilor comments. Comments shall not be related to an item currently before the council or an item that may come before the council in the foreseeable future. It shall be limited to comments, not discussion.
Mayor.
Forsman?
Just kind of giving more heads up. I had learned a lot from that training I got in Boise. Would highly suggest